everybody? Welcome, episode 130 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden, your host here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch on YouTube, whether it's on replay or you're watching live with me, coming along with me in the comment section right now. I appreciate it. Episode 130, like I mentioned, it is sponsored by Gaglione Bros, famous cheesesteaks and subs, located in Point Loma, located in the sports arena, also located at Petco Park on April 14th in the Padres home opener, and the rest of the season at Petco Park, down the third baseline by the Valley Sports San Diego booth in the upper deck. They have a garlic fries stand on the field level behind home plate. So anyone who wants a great meal, go gaglionebros.com to view their full menu and their locations, the phone numbers to contact them if you have any questions. And yeah, they're the sponsor of this episode. Appreciate their support, and I appreciate your guys' support. Hit me up in the comment section or at Talking Friars on Twitter, on Instagram, YouTube in the comment section if you're watching our replay or anything like that as well. I love being interactive with you guys, so feel free to hit me up. What's up, Adam? How's it going tonight? Today we got a lot to discuss. I recorded episode 129 this morning, so hopefully you were able to listen or watch that about Mackenzie Gore and my thoughts on his first spring training outing. I kind of thought that he didn't do as great as in terms of his control, his command, as a lot of fans were saying that he did. Some fans were talking about it and saw the 2 innings and no runs allowed, the no walks, and they were like, oh, Mackenzie did great. And he did great results-wise, but I think he would tell you, I think Ruben Niebla would tell you, and I'm telling you that I think that he has room to improve in his control and his command. And if he doesn't, then I don't think he'll make the Major League roster because he was throwing strikes yesterday, and that's great and all, but he was throwing strikes where Austin Nola didn't have his glove, if that makes sense. And when you're facing the Dodgers lineup with Freddie Freeman and Max Muncy and Mookie Betts and Cody Bellinger and Justin Turner and Will Smith and A.J. Pollock and Chris Taylor, just a loaded lineup, if you continue to throw strikes where Austin Nola or your catcher doesn't want you to throw them and they end up being over the heart of the plate, it's still a strike, right, Ben? Well, that's still going to get mashed because it's not where it's supposed to be. So that's pretty much what I was thinking there. But again, gave my thoughts on the Luke Voigt deal as well because I was working on Friday, so I didn't give my full thoughts. I gave that this morning on episode 129. So if you want to listen or watch that, go ahead there. Just waiting a little bit for some more people to come into this live stream. But we can get started now talking about, obviously, Ron Fowler, the big news. I didn't see it talked about a whole lot on Twitter or anything like that because Peter Seidler is the main control person now. But he and Seidler are the 2 main owners of the Padres, or were. And so that's still big news for me, at least, I think. We have that. We have Luis Campusano and C.J. Abrams performing well today against the Cubs in Mesa. That was a home game for the Cubs. Valley Sports San Diego had the game on, but it wasn't Mud and Dawn. But it was on 97.3 The Fan, obviously, with Jesse and Tony, like it is every game. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Jorge Soler going to the Miami Marlins in a move that kind of was expected in terms of the San Diego Padres not being interested anymore in him when they added Voigt, just because of payroll and that they had a little over $8 million left in luxury tax room before hitting that $230 million value before they would get taxed, before Seidler would get taxed. So I didn't think that they were going to bring him in, especially obviously on the deal that ended up happening, the AAV that the Marlins are going to end up giving Soler, or ending up having that amount of money go towards their luxury tax payroll threshold money. So it's not surprising, and we'll get to that signing as well. We'll get to a couple of interesting, surprising signings as well around the league. There were 3 that kind of stuck out a little bit to me that we'll get to. But first, let's start off with today's spring training game, kind of a little post-game show here. I know You're not going to see very many post-game shows out there, but I figured why not? Let's talk about it because hopefully there's a lot of diehard fans in here as well, and even casual fans. It's interesting, I think, to catch you up on the top prospects as well. But first, let's just start off with what happened in the game. The Padres lost 5-4 to the Cubs. I mean, no one cares about the final score. It's a spring training game. It doesn't matter. Obviously, this was Saturday's game for anyone that's listening or watching maybe on a Sunday morning or something like that. I appreciate it, but this was Saturday's game, March 19th. Luis Campusano homered in the fourth inning. C.J. Abrams had a laser single to center field in the third. He also homered to right in the fifth. We'll get to Campusano and Abrams' home runs. C.J. Abrams finished 2 for 3 at the plate, 2 RBIs, and a stolen base. It's not going to say a stolen base in the box score because it wasn't, but he was called out. But I think he was safe. Trace Thompson, center, I think he was batting cleanup this game because it's on the road. They don't have their A squad in there at all. But Trace Thompson robbed a home run in center. I don't think he's probably more of like a AAA guy. Luis Liberato homered as well for San Diego. Reese Kinnear started on the mound, went 2 innings, gave up 1 run, 1 hit, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. He's more like a minor league depth option as well because a lot of guys are coming back. So he's definitely not at the top of the list in terms of guys that would make the roster. Nabil Chrismat, I think, might make the roster. I think if he has a good spring training, I think that he should make the roster, especially after last year, how valuable he was to the team last year. He went 1 inning, didn't give up a run, 1 hit, no walks, 2 strikeouts. Javi Guerra, man, he's really struggling. Definitely struggling out of the gate here. Obviously was a former infielder, former shortstop that came over in the Craig Kimbrell deal a while ago when Padres traded Kimbrell to the Red Sox. Kimbrell obviously went and won the World Series eventually with them. But Guerra switched to pitching a few years ago. 1 inning, he gave up 3 runs, 4 hits, no walks, 1 strikeout. Daniel Camarena, or Daniel Slamarena, as a lot of people like to call him, 1 2/3 innings, 1 run, 3 hits, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts. So that was pretty much the main pitching lines that fans, like recognizable names that people even care about. The Padres will play Milwaukee tomorrow on Sunday, and then they'll play Colorado Monday at the Guardians of Cleveland, the new Guardian. That's their new name. They'll play them Tuesday. And then they'll play the Angels on Wednesday before having their only off day of their spring training slate. Obviously, they have an off day on April 6th, the day before they start their regular season at Arizona against the Arizona Diamondbacks. But that's on Thursdays, their only off day, 18 games in 19 days in the spring training slate. But talking about, obviously, the main two big prospects that had big games today, Luis Campusano and C.J. Abrams. There's a lot of people. Let's start with Campusano, actually. Bob Melvin has talked about, Victor Caratini not catching Yu Darvish every single time around, like the past couple years, last few years, if you go back to the Cubs and all that. And Bob Melvin said, Caratini, I think Bob Melvin's viewpoint is that he wants the best offensive catcher in there, the best catcher in there. And if it's not Caratini, then the Darvishes, the Musgroves, those guys, they're just going to have to get used to having someone else catch them. And my gut feeling is that Austin Nola will get the starting job to, start out the season. But I think what he means with that Caratini non-guarantee of him catching Darvish and other guys, I think is maybe it's to motivate Caratini or something. But I think it's also hinting that, hey, A.J. Preller's looking around here, and if he wants to add a left fielder or something and another team needs a catcher, they can do that. They're willing to do that, and Caratini might be the most likely to go. Maybe the Padres don't want to give up on Campusano yet. But with that said, Campusano is also, I think, expendable. I would like to keep Campusano, but if you're having to choose between, let's say, Campusano or Abrams, you're picking Campusano to depart. I personally, if you're picking between Robert Hassel III Campusano, I'm picking Campusano to depart. If I'm picking between Gore or Campusano, maybe I'd stick with Campusano over Gore, but it's still close because Gore has looked pretty good, hitting 98, 99 with his fastball on that backfield session we saw a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whenever that was, and then yesterday as well. So maybe they're willing to, part with Campusano over those top three prospects. So I think he's expendable in that way. And maybe it's, I think Campusano as well might just be a AAA guy, starting at AAA right now, because you obviously, I think Jorge Alfaro obviously has more big league experience than Campusano. He can be a DH option if you need him to. And obviously with Campusano, he's not the greatest defensive catcher, and he's been DH. He DH'd today. He did not catch. So with Campusano being more defense-minded, and so that would lead you to believe he's a DH candidate. Well, now that they acquired Luke Voit, that's not really a big option now. He can still DH if Voigt's not playing or he's playing first and the Padres don't even want to DH Hosmer. But Voit seems like to me, at least if I were the manager, if I were Bob Melvin, he'd be pretty much my everyday DH guy. And then an option is you think about having someone like, and I discussed this on episode 129 earlier this morning, is you have Kim at short, Abrams at second, Jake Cronenworth at first if you don't want to play Hosmer at all, and you can have Voit be the DH. Because obviously Cronenworth is probably a better defensive first baseman than Campusano is, or not Campusano, excuse me, than Voit is, or Hosmer. So that's an option as well. That's what the lineup was today. Cronenworth didn't play first because he's a big guy. They're not traveling to other ballparks. But in terms of the lineup configuration today, positionally, with Abrams and Kim was at short, Abrams was at second. They were the top two guys in the order. So I think that's a possibility defensive, the lineup positionally. But getting to Campusano, obviously, he is a power bat. I think he's attractive to a lot of clubs, and other clubs can use him as a DH as well, as a DH option in a possible trade. But I'll share my screen here for the YouTube audience to show Luis Campusano's home run. If anyone didn't see it, here it is from earlier today against Jesse Chavez, who was on he's on a minor league deal for the Cubs. Sloan Park, where they were playing, just absolutely unloads on this ball into left center field. And it was funny that I'm not playing this feed because it's just the Padres broadcast, Jesse and Tony. They do a great job, but it wasn't the more interesting broadcast. It was the more interesting home run call here between on the Campusano home run was actually the Cubs TV network. I was watching that live on MLB.TV, and let's just say that they didn't really have a home run call. Campusano homered, and they acted like nothing happened. I think it was Campusano. That was the guy that homered. That home run call, if you want to call it that. I think they were interviewing someone or they were talking about a certain player's background on a certain Seiya Suzuki. I think they were talking about Seiya Suzuki because he just signed with the Cubs, obviously. And so they were giving background on him and latest updates on him. And while Campusano homered, they didn't even mention it. The reporter just kept talking right through it. So I know it's a Cubs broadcast, but do you want to mention, hey, home run by Luis Campusano makes it a such and such game? They didn't even mention that. So I thought that was kind of weird. But Campusano obviously homered there. I don't think he's as much of a DH option making the big league roster as much as he was, 48 hours, 72 hours ago because of the Luke Voit addition, and he seems like the everyday DH now. But he definitely, if the Padres are entertaining trade proposals for him, trade talks, conversations with other teams, him getting off on the right foot in spring training, I would think it would help teams say, okay, this guy's the real deal hitting-wise. But we'll see. I think fans easily can react emotionally to the first 2 games in spring training, someone hits a home run and they're like, oh, don't trade this guy, opening day bound, that type of thing. I don't think the Padres obviously are thinking that way. I know it's a smaller sample size in spring training this year, 18 games instead of, 4 weeks of games. But with that said, it's still only been 2 games for the Padres. And so this home run, they'll probably end up like forgetting about it. I think they're going to look at the big picture. These guys that are on the outside in, they're going to have like a Fernando Tatis Jr. spring training that he had going into 2019. They're going to have that type of spring training. And a good kind of transition here. They're going to have a spring training that C.J. Abrams is having on pace for right now. And again, it's only been 2 games, but C.J. Abrams performed really well again today against the Cubs, went 2 for 3, drove in 2 runs. He had a stolen base, like I mentioned, but he was called out. There's no replay. But to me, and then the Cubs broadcast didn't help either. They didn't slow it down. They just went at it pretty much full, fast, regular motion because they probably knew that Abrams was safe. But Abrams, he looked good. Power, obviously, there's been talks about him bulking up a little bit, increasing strength, looking bigger, more power. And as the years go along, I think he'll continue to look bigger and bigger and have more power. And for all those people, Jim Russell, that said, a couple of weeks ago that Brian Reynolds was a 6-win player, I'd part with CJ, essentially saying I'd part with CJ Abrams in a heartbeat for Brian Reynolds. Well, maybe slow your roll there. I'm on the big CJ train. I don't classify myself on the CJ Abrams bandwagon because I was on the wagon before you could call it a bandwagon. I've believed in CJ for a long time, and I'm not hopping on the bandwagon. I've been the leader of the bandwagon, I feel like. Especially, I've been stronger in being the bandwagon leader on the favor of keeping CJ Abrams in trades, especially since that Brian Reynolds deal was being talked about. And people saying, the Padres are probably have to give up CJ Abrams. Would you give him up? And a lot of people, I've seen people on Twitter saying, yeah, I would give him up. And I don't agree with that. Look, he has the potential to be Brian Reynolds. I think better than Brian Reynolds. And so to give him up when you could have him and another outfielder that you could get in a trade, I think that's probably smarter. Or you just have Tommy Pham for 1 year and you have Robert Hassel III come up, and you can have CJ and Robert Hassel III next season. You have CJ come up sometime this season. I think that's just a better option. You have CJ for 6 years of control, which was more than Reynolds. You don't have to pay him as much money because he's not he hasn't solidified himself as a big leaguer. So you're paying him the rookie salary, which has increased, but it's not $5 million. It's less than $1 million at first. So you're saving a little bit of money that way. And just CJ, he has a potential to be a 5-tool player. He already has the speed, already has the arm. He's already good defensively. He already has the hit tool. People want to say he's a slap hitter, but call it what you want to call it. I don't care. The guy's worst batting average in the minors so far is 296. I think he's hitting 500 through 2 games in spring training. Again, I'm not going to overreact to 2 spring training games. That's just not who I am. I'm a realist. I look at things that are I like to look at the big picture. Let's just put it that way. But he did look good for the YouTube audience. I'll share my screen here for you guys to watch the CJ Abrams home run. Hang on. Before we get to that, Gil says CJ is going to hit. He's going to be a 33 player. Mark my words. I don't know about this year because I don't know if he'll be called up at the beginning of the season and he doesn't have that 30 home run power yet. But I do agree that if he bulks up, he can reach that. Abrams is a version of Tatis. Anthony Ritter says, I think he's a smaller version. I think he's a lesser version. I don't think, hopefully injury luck, he won't. Maybe, and some of it's not even injury luck. Let's just face it. It's just being dumb. like the motorcycle incident with Tatis. So I think Abrams won't suffer as many injuries as Tatis has, especially early in his career like this. And hopefully the subluxations and all that don't even happen. But I think he's a smaller version of Tatis, and I think he's probably it'll be close. I think he has the potential to be faster than Tatis if he isn't already. Gil also says the uniform doesn't look as baggy on Abrams this time around. Yeah, and they probably gave him the same size, and that just shows that he's really putting the work, probably eating more a little bit. And yeah, it's from reports that I've seen, he's actually getting even faster still while gaining weight. So all signs point positive towards CJ Abrams, developing into that guy to improve power-wise and really be that five-tool player that I think he can be. So here's the CJ Abrams home run for the YouTube audience. Let's see if it can load here. My internet. For anyone that watches the wrap-up show with Jim Russell, I mean, this is me, Jim Russell, my internet right now. It's not great. Yeah, it's not responding here. Hopefully, you guys can still see me on the YouTube stream. Let me know if you can, because I do want to definitely get to the Ron Fowler topic and get to some more of the signings. Let's see here. Yeah, it's still not responding. All right, so hopefully you guys can still see me. Again, CJ Abrams, 2 for 3 today, drove in 2 runs. He got called out on the stolen base, but I think he was safe. And my internet's still saying it's not responding, the live stream, I'm trying to play the CJ Abrams home run for you guys, but you guys can look that up. As for the next piece of news, so Campusano, Abrams have big days. Ron Fowler, he is gone. He is not an owner of the San Diego Padres anymore. That was the big news of today, I think. I mean, CJ Abrams and Luis Campusano, they played well, but at the end of the day, it's one game. But Padres-wise, Ron Fowler, he was now a minority owner for the Padres because Peter Seidler took over in November of 2020. But credit to Ron Fowler from the time that he was with the Padres. Obviously, Kevin Acee, the Union Tribune, came out today saying that Ron Fowler was no longer a Padres owner. And this was a little surprising considering that I knew he took a step back. But I still saw him at a few games last year, sitting in his regular seats right by the dugout. And it seems like he was still, involved a little bit in the team, but he wasn't involved in the full day-to-day operations of the team. And now he's not even a part of the organization anymore. It's not known. I do want to make it clear. It's not known who the stakes were sold to. Kevin Acee said that Ron Fowler doesn't have any more stakes in the team anymore. He's no longer a stakeholder in the Padres. And I think I know why, or a part of why it contributed, or why part of the reason why Fowler is not with the Padres anymore, and we'll get to that. But he and Peter Seidler, for anyone that didn't know, they took over the team in 2012. He was, like I mentioned, Ron Fowler was the majority owner during the 2020 season, that 2020 playoff appearance. And he was obviously here, approved Preller being the rock star GM and making all those moves. Matt Kemp, James Shields, Justin Upton, BJ Upton, Melvin Upton Jr., that's what he ended up being called. Craig Kimbrell, Derek Norris, Will Mitterbrooks. He approved all those deals and improved Preller to just go for it. But obviously that didn't work out. And he was the one that was the head owner giving the contract to Eric Hosmer, 8 years, $144 million. And that is obviously, that's hurt the organization long term and definitely affected their chances to add a much higher impact left fielder. They haven't even added a left fielder, period. And so the Hosmer contract, no doubt, has affected that. I know last year they were interested in getting Joey Gallo, but they didn't really want to give up Robert Hassel III, but there were reports that contradicting reports that they did want to give up him. They were okay with that, but the Rangers just didn't want to take on that much of Hosmer's contract. So him being the head owner while that happened is definitely a stain on his, I guess, legacy. But at the same time, you do have to applaud him for being willing to give that money to Hosmer, just because, look, that was obviously the biggest deal at the time in Padres history, contract-wise. I mean, Will Myers was $83 million, I think. And so that was like almost, a little less than double, but much bigger increase in terms of the Padres franchise record for biggest contract handed out. And that deal that he gave to Hosmer as the owner, it did, whether you like it or not, it did kind of shift the Padres from their rebuild to, okay, we're still rebuilding, but at least we're ascending towards wanting to contend. And it did, whether you like it or not as well, it made the Padres attractive to players like Manny Machado because they had that big name all-star player on the roster. I know that the Padres were pretty much bidding against themselves. That's what it seems like, because the Red Sox didn't really have that big of interest. They went and got Mitch Moreland on a shorter-term deal. That was like a quarter of the Hosmer length, contract. So it seemed like they were bidding against themselves. But that was like the buzz of the offseason. That's what MLB Network was talking about. They were like, oh, the Padres got Eric Hosmer. Wow, this is a big impact thing. And I was excited about the deal because it did signal that the Padres were really wanting to contend and all of that. But at the same time, obviously seeing that his best years were probably not there in the future, especially like now in 2022, when that seemed like the prime window of contention. Now, obviously, that deal has hurt them. But you still have to give it to Fowler, obviously, signaling, wanting to contend and be that playoff caliber team and at least make that direction to a playoff caliber team. And now moving to why I think you saw Fowler now not be with the Padres, have any stakes in the Padres anymore, be a stakeholder in the Padres anymore, is him and Peter Seidler. I don't think that they were in the same thought. I don't think they had the same thoughts. I didn't think their thought process was on the same wavelength. I didn't think they shared the same thought process and the way to go about things. Ron Fowler, he was the head labor negotiator in 2017 for Major League Baseball side of things during the CBA talks. This lockout that just happened, he was in Florida for those meetings representing Major League Baseball and the owners wanting to not play. He was on the side of Major League Baseball and obviously didn't want to pay the players as much money the young players. They didn't want to give the young player. He was part of that group that didn't want to give the young players, $50 million in pre-arbitration pool money. They initially wanted to give him like $15 million in pre-arbitration bonus pool money, the players in total. So that didn't make the players happy. And so meanwhile, while Ron Fowler doesn't want to give players as much money as the players want, meanwhile, you have Peter Seidler pretty much doing the opposite and giving Fernando Tatis Jr. $340 million before he even plays a full Major League season. So that dynamic between Seidler, who is the main owner, majority owner, wanting to spend money, and Fowler, who was known to not really want to spend as much money as Seidler, that probably created, I would think, some weird, awkward relationship, and a relationship that probably wasn't the best. Now, I'm not here. I don't know anything on the inside. I'm not saying that Seidler and Fowler hated each other. But Seidler, now maybe this is Seidler or the Padres PR staff just recommending this to Seidler and saying, hey, maybe you probably shouldn't talk to AC about this, this story, and give your thoughts about it. You don't need, big headlines about it and take away from spring training. But I think it is worthy to note that Seidler declined to be quoted in Kevin Acey's article. So maybe he wanted to say something and he thought better of it. I don't know. But, he could have at least been quoted in the article and said, I appreciate Ron for all he did and all that. And now AC did say in the article that Seidler did, talk about and mention his Ron Fowler's community efforts and love for baseball and stuff like that in his time with the Padres. But he wasn't quoted. So I think there is something to that. I think that their relationship wasn't as great as it would have been if they were on the same page money-wise. I think that's an attributing factor. I just don't think Ron Fowler just steps down for no reason as an owner. Being an owner of a franchise, especially when you're not a majority owner, so you're not even in control of the day-to-day, that just seems like a great position to be in. You probably, your free tickets, you can go to any game you want. He sits right next to the Padres dugout. It just doesn't seem like he would just step down for no reason at all. So that's interesting. There has to be some reason. That's my point. There has to be some reason for him to just step down like this and not have any stake in the team anymore. And I wrote about this on gaslantball.com. There was a quote, I don't have it right now in front of me, Rob Manfred was saying in 2017 that Ron Fowler, there was no one that he knew about that was more dedicated to the labor negotiations and CBA talks in Major League Baseball, among all the owners than Ron Fowler, that would be willing to talk to you about CBA talks and all that. And so that just shows this guy is definitely was on the side of trying to penny pinch a little bit and not paying the players as much as they probably deserve based on the revenue that they bring in. And Seidler seems like he wasn't on that side. He was the one owner that released penned a letter to the fans when games were canceled in the middle of the lockout saying, we hope that this is resolved. It's unfortunate, something to that effect. So he wasn't on the same side as Fowler. He was not in those meetings. I'm sure secretly he was like, come on, owners, really? You don't want to give players, you can't just say, okay, you're billionaires. You can't just say, okay, and let's move on and have a full spring training to reduce injuries and give us more time to form out rosters and all that. You can't just say, okay, we'll give you this. Not saying that you have to completely fold, but I think Peter was more on the player's side and all that. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, and that had to attribute to why Fowler isn't an owner anymore, I think. So that's a big news story. Again, my internet sucks right now, so I'm trying to share my screen, and it's just the spinning wheel of death is just there right now. So I can't even see your guys' comments right now because part of it's cut off a little bit. So I apologize for that. It's still spinning. I can't really do anything about that. I can't even stop trying to share or anything. So I do want to, thanks for bearing with me. But we talked about Ron Fowler, talked about CJ Abrams having a homer, Campusano having a homer in minor league action earlier today. And then Jorge Soler goes to the Marlins. Carlos Correa goes to the Twins. Nick Castellanos goes to the Phillies, and Kenley Jansen goes to the Atlanta Braves. I thought those were all pretty interesting deals. Obviously, Jorge Soler, there was reports out this week that the Padres were interested in him, but I don't think that's surprising that Soler doesn't go to the Padres and end up go to the Padres. The Padres only had $8.6 million of room under that luxury tax, $230 million number to have before they get taxed. So they weren't going to add Jorge Soler on a 3 or $36 million contract like Miami was. And they're not going to I was making this point earlier on Twitter. If they're gonna go over, if Peter Seidler and the Padres are gonna decide to go over the luxury tax, they're gonna go way over. They're not gonna just go $5 million over like the Soler deal probably would have put in them. They're gonna go way over, like Steve Cohen is gonna do. Like the Dodgers are planning on doing. They're gonna go way over. They're not. There's no point in doing what they did last year and barely going over, because now they had to forfeit, I think, draft picks, and then now they can't go over unless they want to get taxed 30% for how much they go over. So you think they'd want to reset so they can go over next year. So it's not surprising. Obviously, with the addition of Luke Voit and that power, Jorge Soler, to me, he's not great defensively. He classifies more as a DH only, like Voit for me. And while Soler, I guess, can play the outfield, that's not who you want in left field or any outfield position for that matter. And so with Voit being the DH, there just wasn't really room for him. And so the Marlins, obviously, they had the money to spend to give to Soler. So it's not really surprising that Soler ended up not being on the Padres. And I think all those reports of the Padres being interested along with the Braves of, pursuing Soler, I think for the Padres' sake at least, those went out the window when they got Voit, because now they have that DH. As for what that means for the Padres, the Soler deal, I think it means Pham to the Padres is more likely, or maybe the same amount as likely, because that I mentioned that $8 million that they have in room. I think Pham is going to be like $4 or $5 million on a 1-year deal, and so that still gives them that flexibility if they want to add a reliever or something like that at the deadline, or just if something comes up, it gives them a few $1 million of room. And I don't think Conforto will cost less than $8 million. And I don't think anyone else that's like a big name that would cost less than $8 million. And Pham already has familiarity with the Padres organization. And Pham, he still hit 15 home runs last year. He's not coming off getting stabbed in the back. I think his eye issues are probably fine. So you would hope that he would just have a bounce back year, and that's a good thing for the Padres. And then you can just part ways with him after the year when he's a free agent. I wouldn't be too down with that. I think Pham's a better hitter than Profar is, and I think having Profar in left field, starting left fielder, wouldn't just hurt the team because of his bat and not even just his bat, but he's not the greatest defender in the world in left field. But it would also hurt because you're now taking Profar out of like that utility role, like where if someone gets hurt, he can go play that position. He can go play the outfield. He can go play the infield, play first base, because he has been actually pretty good defensively at first. So if you want to put him in at first late in games somehow, and he has good at bats off the bench for a pinch hitter role, it just limits the things that Profar can do because you have him in left field. So I think Pham is definitely a viable option. But as for the other moves, Carlos Correa to the Minnesota Twins, that was surprising. Definitely player friendly, like the Nick Martinez deal. He's getting paid a lot of money, but it's a 3-year deal technically for the Twins. Obviously, they had Gio Urshela at shortstop after parting with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who they had for like 1 day. Traded him to the Yankees with Josh Donaldson. And they end up using that Josh Donaldson money on Carlos Correa. And so now the Twins have really, really improved. I have family out there, so I'm really happy that they get, a contender, it seems like, for a wild card spot. I would still put the White Sox as that NL Central leader, or AL Central, because they're just more overall talented. I think their pitching staff, they have a great bullpen as well. Not as talented as a bullpen the Twins are, comparison to the White Sox. But the Twins, they add Sonny Gray. They add, obviously, Carlos Correa. They add Gary Sanchez. They add Gio Urshela, who's probably now their third baseman. That's a pretty good infield. You have Luis Ariz, who can be the utility guy. If Byron Buxton stays healthy, he's probably a top 3 to 5 center fielder in baseball. One of the best outfielders in baseball, period. It's just a matter if he can stay healthy. They still have Max Kepler there, and that's a player that Padres Twitter is interested in, but that's probably not happening because I think the Twins, obviously, if they sign Carlos Correa to a one-year deal, essentially, because he has a player option after this year and a player option after next year. And then he's obviously could be a free agent after year 3 if he ends up going that way. But essentially signing Carlos Correa to a one-year deal, that's how the Twins have to think about it. They're going all in for this year. They want to win. And so taking away Max Kepler, who can hit at the top of that lineup, I would think that would be counterproductive to what they're doing. So I don't see that as an option. But that was definitely an interesting move that the Twins ended up making. Nick Castellanos, the Padres had interest in him before the lockout. He goes to the Philadelphia Phillies on a 5-year, $100 million deal, $20 million a year average annual value. And that their defense obviously isn't great, but they're adding power. Nick Castellanos, Harper, Hoskins, Alec Boehm, if you want to think that he'll have a bounce back year. They have Gene Segura there as well, JT Realmuto. So it's really top heavy, that Phillies batting order, it seems like. Nola and Wheeler at the top of the rotation, then you don't really know what else is after that. So they're an interesting team. If the offense is hot, that'll definitely carry them and help them out. And that extra playoff team might help. But I'd still put a lot of teams ahead of them in the National League. The Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, the Braves, the Mets, probably the Brewers right now, maybe the Cardinals. So that's 7 teams right there. So I think their offense will definitely carry them. And we'll see if they add more pitching. And we'll just see. Now, injuries might happen, obviously, in the NL East, so that might help them as well. But talking about the NL East, I mean, the Braves, Mets fans, obviously, they can talk all they want about Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom and Chris Bassett and having that top 3 in the rotation. But Carrasco and Walker aren't guarantees. Their bullpen isn't very impressive to me. Their lineup isn't very impressive to me, to be quite honest. Lindor did not have a great year last year. J.D. Davis isn't great defensively at third base and kind of spotty offensively. I know he has power, but he's kind of spotty offensively. It seems like they're going to have Dom Smith play left field, and he is not the greatest defensively either. So while they have talented players picking up Starling Marte and former All-Star Eduardo Escobar, I like those moves. Obviously, Max Scherzer and Steve Cohen obviously willing to spend money, and they created a tax for Steve Cohen, calling the Steve Cohen tax when you hit that 4th level of the luxury tax. I don't think that they're quite there yet. So I think the Braves are definitely the class of the NL East, still obviously winning the World Series. I know they didn't bring back Freddie Freeman, but they have Matt Olson, and they bring in Kenley Jansen. That's another big surprising move. You'd think that he would stay with the Dodgers, and especially after the Dodgers had Freddie Freeman, they seem like the National League favorite right now. But the Braves are right after them, I would think. They add Matt Olson. They have an infield of Austin Riley, who had a great year last year. Danby Swanson having a good year last year. Ozzie Albies. Matt Olson, obviously, they into an 8-year deal. Travis d'Arnaud at catcher. They have Acuna out there in the outfield. They're getting Marcell Ozuna back. Obviously, it was obviously inexcusable what he did, and that got him suspended last year, but he's back, a power option there. So they're going to be a loaded team. But Kenley Jansen going there is obviously good for the Padres unless they have to end up playing the Braves and they're in the 9th inning situation down by a run. But Jansen he's kind of come up small, I think, in some big moments, especially with the Dodgers. And but most of the time, though, especially during the regular season, he's really good at that closer position. So that's definitely a positive for the Padres, not having to face him in those big divisional matchups. But it did definitely add a lot of intrigue when you see Kenley Jansen running into the bullpen and then a commercial break happens in those really close games, Padres-Dodgers, the last couple years. And you're like, oh, this is really intriguing. Is Jansen going to blow it? So we're not going to get that situation interdivision. We could get that April 14th or April 15th or April 16th. Is it a 4-game set? I think it's a 4-game set. So April 17th which that Braves-Padres game on Sunday Night Baseball, that is there on ESPN, the K-Rod broadcast on ESPN2 as well. So that's a big-time matchup that's happening. So we might see it then, but for division-wise, we're not going to see that. So that's a positive. But that was a surprising move. Correa to the Minnesota Twins was a surprising move, especially when it felt like the Astros were willing to give him a one-year deal or something like that to come back to Houston. I think a long-term deal was floated out there, but Martin Maldonado on Twitter was like publicly courting Correa and all that. But I was surprised they didn't go back to the Astros if it was going to be a one-year high AAV thing, especially if he was going to go to the Twins where they're not the class of the American League right now, right? I would still put that as teams like probably Houston, Toronto. Toronto's really they've really improved this year with Matt Chapman and Kevin Gausman and Kikuchi, and they just really added. So I think them, obviously the Rays, the White Sox, the Astros, obviously, I think they're still going to be competitive as well in that American League West. The Rangers, I don't think they're there yet, but maybe they'll contend for a wild card spot because they have 6 instead of 5 teams in the playoffs in each league. So just in terms of the landscape of each league, there are teams that are, contending, middle teams that have really improved their rosters, at least middle of the pack teams last year, like the Blue Jays, like the Mets last year. I know they didn't make the playoffs last year, but like the Mets, the Reds, there are teams though that obviously, like the A's, like the Reds, have decided to just go into rebuild mode when they still had some talented guys. Obviously, the A's had Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, and they're just saying, we're going to give up here. They had Chris Bassett. They're just saying, no, we're going to let Bob Melvin go. We're going to give away all of our best players. That's unfortunate. They brought in Starling Marte last year, only to just let him go in free agency. Yeah, they're getting a lot of good prospects back, but Matt Olson and Matt Chapman are better than any of the prospects they're going to get back. Pache, he's okay, but he's not Matt Olson offensively. But interesting moves, obviously. Soler to the Marlins, obviously, that was going to be a realistic possibility once the Padres signed Luke Voit. So a lot of topics covered today. Again, I apologize. This internet, it's like Jim Russell's internet right now. It's not responding. It's still the spinning wheel of death, so I can't even see your comments right now. So I apologize for that. But a lot covered here today. Episode 130, presented by Gaglione Bros, Cheesesteaks and Subs. CJ Abrams, Luis Campusano, great days in the minors, in spring training. Ron Fowler gone. Kind of gave my reasoning why I thought that probably happened. Him and Peter Seidler, their relationship. And then Soler going to the Marlins and some other interesting deals that happened as well. Luke Voit, again, my reaction to that, episode 129, you can go listen or watch that. I'd filmed that early, put that out earlier this morning, as well as a little bit of breakdown on Mackenzie Gore's first spring training start and some of my thoughts that are contradictory to a lot of what Padres fans thought in terms of his outing, because I think a lot of fans probably didn't watch it. They were at work or something, and they just saw 2 innings, no runs, no walks, and they were like, yay. And while that's a good step in the right direction, there's still work to be done, and you can go watch that breakdown that I have on YouTube. I clipped that breakdown out of the episode and put that out. Or you can go watch or listen to the whole video, and I appreciate that as well. Again, Talking Friars, Twitter and Instagram, any questions, any mailbag questions, I can always answer that. Appreciate you in the comments. Hopefully my internet improves for the next stream, for the next episode. But yeah, this is episode 130. Hope you guys have a good night, good Saturday night. Ben Fadden signing off here. Have a good night, everyone. See ya.